Hello there folks, my name is Spoonks and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Chat. This is the show where I break down the top 5 domestic box office results, see where each movie landed, and see how well each movie did. So let's get started. Number 5 was Radical, opening with $2.6 million this weekend domestically and $7.7 million worldwide. So this was a neat little surprise. I had no idea this movie was coming out. I've never even heard of this movie if I'm being honest with you, but like many surprises, this is a film that was able to surpass expectations and chart in the top 5, which is always nice to see something completely unexpected happen in the top 5. One of these more lesser known movies being able to chart in there is always a delight to see, especially for this movie, as I've heard stupendous things about this movie after seeing it chart in the top 5. If you don't know, basically a teacher has to teach some elementary school students in one of the worst cities in the world. The students aren't having the best of luck right now, so Eugenio Derbez has to help them out. And from what I've heard, it's a very solid, very well done movie, and people are loving it. And the fact that, once again, it was able to chart in the top 5 is nice to see. Don't think it's going to last very long in the top 5, but, you know, once again, seeing it as it was able to chart above some other contenders is always a pleasure to see. Not much more else to say here, except nice to see something like this chart in the top 5. Number 4 was Priscilla, making $5 million this weekend domestically, and that total stays the same worldwide as it hasn't been released in any international markets yet. So if you remember last weekend, I didn't have the biggest hopes for this movie. I thought it would chart in the top 5, but it wouldn't leave a huge impact on it. And while it definitely had a much bigger opening than I thought it would, it still fell pretty much in line where I thought it would land. There did seem to be interest, certainly some awards buzz for this movie, and I have heard spectacular things about this movie. But since it's A24, I didn't think it would reach as big of a wider appeal as many other movies had. But then again, you know, maybe word of mouth will catch on this movie. Maybe something spectacular will happen here. But overall, I think this is a pretty modest opening for this movie. It does seem to be hitting the ballpark for that A24 crowd and people who wanted to see the story of Priscilla Presley. But unless if this movie can pull off an Everything Everywhere All at Once, I'm not expecting bigger things for this movie in terms of box office. But, you know, still, the fact that it was able to shake up the top 5 like this is still rather impressive to see. Number 3 was Killers of the Flower Moon, making $6.8 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $52 million and a worldwide total of $119 million. So while yes, the film had a much better hold than last weekend, it only fell 26% prior to the previous weekend, which is a fantastic hold to see. It shows that maybe it will be able to maintain a core audience, maybe something interesting will happen here, and the fact that it surpassed 100 million worldwide is still rather impressive to see for an essentially 3.5 hour long adult drama. Certainly something to be proud there, but once again, the fact that this is a $200 million movie is still upsetting. I'm not sure if this movie is going to be able to make that money back. It is still slowing down. I'm not sure if the word of mouth is going to be able to pick it up enough to help it get across the initial budget. It does seem to be faring a bit better internationally, but I cannot put any more emphasis on a bit. It doesn't look likely that this is going to be an overall big hit at the box office, unfortunately. It may be a good test for the Apple TV Plus new method of releasing movies in theaters, but in terms of being a box office success, this isn't looking very likely. Number 2 was Taylor Swift The Eras Tour, making $13 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $166 million and a worldwide total of $218 million. This was a much better weekend for this movie than last weekend in terms of hold, as it had a phenomenal hold of just 12%, folks, which, by the way, is its best hold in its entire theatrical run, which is outstanding to see. We may see this movie starting to pick itself back up, I guess, but it's not like it really needed to pick itself back up because this movie is still a phenomenal success otherwise, as once again, it's just like a little under 40 million away from surpassing 200 million domestically, folks, and it's already surpassed that milestone worldwide. This is hands down the biggest concert movie ever, and it's definitely doesn't need any more money, yet it's going to continue to do so. So yes, another phenomenal weekend for Taylor Swift the Eras Tour. We'll see how much further this movie can go. I don't know how much longer it's going to be in theaters. I think we're heading on the last couple weeks for this movie, so we'll see if it can end out with a bang. But yes, once again, easily the biggest movie of the moment right now and one of the biggest successes of the box office for now. And finally, let's end the video off with the number one movie of the weekend, which was once again Five Nights at Freddy's, making $19 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $113 million and a worldwide total of $215 million. So yes, folks, this movie is still a box office success. It surpassed $100 million domestically, $200 million worldwide. It is the biggest horror movie of the year. Domestically, it still needs to surpass, I believe, Megan and The Nun 2 worldwide to surpass those milestones, but I think it's likely that it will be able to do so. And given the $25 million budget, this has made more than enough to be a box office success. But the thing is here, though, is that this was a pretty rough weekend for this movie, as it had a massive drop off of 76%. No matter how you look at this, that is a terrible hold for this movie. It goes to show you that this was a very front-loaded movie, and I think the Peacock hybrid release did hurt this a little bit in terms of repeat values. So I think this is definitely going to be something they need to consider for the sequel. They're probably going to have to make not only the sequel good enough to warrant repeat viewings, but also maybe just go away with the Peacock hybrid release, because that is definitely taking away some of the repeat value for this movie. I also think that this, given the fact that this was much more for the diehard fans of this franchise, it kind of turned away the general public, as the general public is definitely not as enthusiastic as the FNAF fans are over this movie. So I think the word of mouth from, regular moviegoers might have hurt this movie as well. So again, quality control over the sequel is definitely going to need to be a big factor into that. So yeah, this, despite it still being a huge box office success, let's not ignore that. This is still a massive success overall. This was still a pretty big drop off for this movie, and we're gonna have to see if this movie can pick itself back up from the rut, or if it's gonna continue to fall in these coming weeks. So yeah, definitely very interesting things going on with Five Nights at Freddy's. We'll see where it goes from here, but yeah, still very interesting things happening with this movie. And those were your top 5 domestic box office results for this weekend, but we're not quite done yet, as we've got another week ahead of us and new movies hitting theaters. And this weekend we have one new major wide release. I am aware that Journey to Bethlehem is also coming out this weekend, but I don't really have much to say about that. I'm not expecting a whole lot for this movie, so let's just move on to the other main wide release, which is The Marvels. I don't think it would be controversial for me to say that it has been a terrible year for the superhero genre. Out of the 6 superhero movies that have released thus far this year, only 2 of them were actually successful. Those being, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Everything else underperformed, like Blue Beetle and Quantumania, or completely flopped, like Shazam! Fury of the Gods and The Flash. And unfortunately, I see this movie being somewhere in the middle between underperformer and big flop, because outside of the marketing, which has been this movie's only saving grace right now, the marketing has actually been pretty solid. I've been seeing a lot of promos and stuff for it recently to drum up hype for it. They're doing the best that they can, but unfortunately the interest is just so low and lacking on this movie. I don't see a single person talking about this movie. I haven't heard anyone, whether it be on the internet or even in the real world, saying anything about this movie. There is just no interest in this movie at all. I'm sure the die-hard MCU fans are going to rush out to see this movie, which will probably give it a better than worse opening probably, but it's still not going to be enough. This is a hugely expensive movie. The official budget hasn't been officially reported yet, but it's said to be somewhere around $200 million, and I think this is definitely going to be a pretty big disappointment this weekend. Don't think it's going to be another Shazam 2 by any means, but this is definitely not looking good. Things aren't looking good for this movie. Yeah, overall, I don't have any real solid expectations for this, unfortunately. But we'll see how well this movie truly does, as well as the rest of the movies that land in the top 5 on the next Box Office Chat. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Box Office Chat. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied, unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.